Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. This is going to be my Spider-Man Q&A. Whole bunch of questions about how he fits into the Avengers. Are we going to see Defenders? So I tried to include as much stuff as possible. There's going to be a whole bunch more Spider-Man and Guardians stuff happening during the break, so make sure you click that bell to enable alerts so that you don't miss out on anything. So here we go. Joven asks, what's your thoughts on the Spider-Man logo being red and yellow? Connection to Iron Man, hint Iron Spider, anything different from his comic book branding? No, I think there's going to be just a little bit of winking at the Iron Spider, but the suit that you see him in for most of that, the Civil War suit, will probably be the only suit that he wears. The one exception to that is the hoodie that he wears in part of the trailer. The film will probably jump around in time, so we'll probably see him before Civil War, where he's wearing the goggles and the hoodie. Then after Civil War, when Iron Man's like, yeah, you can totally keep the suit, but it does not mean that you are an Avenger. So the red on yellow is just a little bit of eye winking about Marvel and Spider-Man coming together in the presence of Iron Man in the film. So it gets a little meta, but I don't think that he's going to be wearing the actual Iron Spider suit that most people think of when they think Iron Spider. Next question, Altep asks, was that Kraven? Please help me. So no, there's no Kraven in this movie, but I do think that they'll use him in the trilogy at some point. The person you're thinking of is the Vulture. It's Michael Keaton wearing his jacket with the fur around the collar. Like that's his Vulture jacket. So that's why he looks a little bit like Kraven, just because he has that big collar. Next one, Smooth says, Kingpin is rumored to be in this movie. So I don't think there's going to be any Kingpin in the actual movie, but Vincent D'Onofrio did say he would love to be in Spider-Man. The funny thing about that is that everybody wants to be in a Spider-Man film. Like you can see Clark Gregg sitting off in the distance waving his hand, please put me in a Spider-Man movie, this would be so much fun. So what I think is going to happen is if they ever work Kingpin into a Spider-Man movie, it'll just be at Easter egg level. You'll hear about the Kingpin of crime, but he'll stay relatively local to Manhattan. You won't hear about him so much out in Queens where Spider-Man spends most of his time. Next question, Robert asks, do you think they'll do Spider-Verse with the other live-action Spider-Man like Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire? No, I don't think that they're going to do that, but as for other Spider people, Silk is in the movie. The character who turns into Silk in the comics is in, but they might not necessarily do that. The thing about Spider-Man is that he's one of the most popular comic book characters of all time. That means that there are a ton of characters in the Spider-Verse, so there's no way they'll have time to get to them all in the movies. But with characters like Ned Leeds, they might not do Hobgoblin. With characters like Silk, they might not actually have her put the costume on, but they totally exist in that universe. It's just the problem is the more characters you stuff in, the less time you have to spend developing other characters. So I'm not expecting Miles Morales or Spider-Gwen or Silk or even Venom to put costumes on in any of the movies, but like we could totally see Eddie Brock show up. Next question, Shafkat asks, what do you think Vulture's motivation for being a villain is? Well, there are a couple things that happened to him in the comics that they could include in the movie. There was a business partner that stole all his money, so he had to turn to crime, but he also, later in the comics, had a grandson with a medical condition, so he was forced to steal to get the money for his medical treatments, so they could go any number of different directions, but the way Michael Keaton comes off in the trailer, he seems vicious, so maybe he had a family member that died. He has a daughter in the comics, so maybe his daughter died because of something the Avengers did. That seems like the thing that they've been going with since Civil War. Like the Avengers cause collateral damage and everybody hates them now. Next question though, Phoenix asks, is there any actor playing Norman Osborn? Not as far as we know. It seems like they're holding off on the Osborn stuff, the stuff that you've seen a whole bunch of in the other movies. Just because they might not be in this first movie though, doesn't mean that they won't ever do Green Goblin stuff. I think that they're just taking their time, so maybe by the third movie they'll loop them back in because that'll be almost 6 years down the road. They've already dated the second Spider-Man movie for 4th of July weekend 2019. So if production stays on track, within about 4 years, we could see more Green Goblin. I think one of the big criticisms has been them just redoing the same story in Spider-Man movies, the origin story over and over reliance on the same types of characters. So they're trying to do something completely different with this first movie, but that doesn't mean they're never going to do those other characters again like Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy. Next question, kind of a follow-up to that. Dakota asks, can you discuss the possibility of Gwen or MJ in the sequels? Who'd you like to see play those roles? Well, there is a rumor that Mary Jane is in the movie, but in a very backdoor, secretive kind of way. The thing about those characters is that they're so fundamental to the Spider-Man character that you kind of have to do them. Like you could get away with not doing Green Goblin. There are so many Spider-Man villains that you could make the main villain of a movie, but there are really only a handful of characters that are very close to the Peter Parker character. And because he's in high school, he hangs out with his friends all the time, so he would run into those people pretty quickly. So I will say I do think that Mary Jane is somewhere in Spider-Man Homecoming, but we won't learn about it till like the very end of the film. And it'll be something really offhanded, like, oh my god, she's been here this whole time and we didn't realize it. But if you're worried about them not being anywhere in there, don't worry. They're just not going to include them in any of the marketing for the movie. Next question, Gaming Speedster asks, what other upgrades do you think Spider-Man got? So I think it's just, utility belt, like little things that make him seem more like comic book Spider-Man. The suit is extra durable, it holds more gear, more webbing cartridges. It probably helps him with a couple cool trick shots with his webbing. Like look at this big scene here where he's trying to hold this boat together. This is crazy. So the materials that Stark used to build the suit are much more advanced than the stuff that he was using for his homemade suit. So like his webbing is probably just as strong as the webbing that he originally made, but his homemade gauntlets would probably get crushed under the stress of all this weight. So the Stark Tech suit is just a much stronger version of the comic book costume. And you can also kind of see his eyes open and dilate, like the eyes move a little bit like Deadpool's eyes moved in that movie with CG, but because it's Stark Tech, they're more like camera irises. I think a really good example is when he's fighting the fake Avengers, you see his eyes move.
What's up, guys? Wait a minute, you want the real Avengers?
Like he doesn't need to tell the suit to open the irises, they just automatically respond to his muscle contractions. So the easiest explanation is just expect the eyes to work a lot like Deadpool's eyes during that movie. Next question, Zenmaster asks, I wonder what Tony means by other people. Is he talking about S.H.I.E.L.D., street heroes like the Defenders? Does he mean Captain America, Secret Avengers? Really, he's just talking about the adults. Like, the adults will handle this, you go to school and be a kid. If you really want to dig into that, yeah, I mean, S.H.I.E.L.D. does exist, it's above board now, so technically they'd be the ones to respond to that. But if anyone, he's talking about the actual Avengers. Like he says, Peter isn't a real Avenger yet. Don't worry, the adults, the Avengers, will handle stuff like that. You go on and be a kid, have fun, go to school. He seems to have a great interest in Peter just continuing to be a kid. So that's like the worst possible advice you could give to teenage Peter Parker. Of course he wants to prove himself and be a hero, so there's no way he's going to listen to Iron Man. Next question, Spencer asks, I'm seeing a fair amount of Iron Man in the trailer, but when Iron Man's flying next to him, I'm wondering how large a part he's going to play. I still want this to be a Spider-Man movie. So that's totally true. It is a Spider-Man movie. Iron Man's just going to be in part of it. But you can see how they want to hype the movie up as much as possible, so they're going to put as much Iron Man as they possibly can into those trailers. So I would be willing to bet that the scenes that we saw, with the exception of like a big final battle where Iron Man helps out, that's pretty much every scene Iron Man is in the movie. Like when he drops him off, when he gives him the talking to at the Avengers base, look kid, let the adults handle this. And then when he's flying through the neighborhood with him, maybe like a little bit more. But if this is going to be like a 2.5 hour movie, I'd be willing to bet that there's as little as like 20 minutes of Iron Man in the movie, which is about how much Spider-Man was in Civil War. There's probably as much Iron Man in the Spider-Man movie as Spider-Man was in Civil War. Next question, Israel asks, do you think that we'll see any connections to the Defenders show or any of the Netflix series? Maybe somebody confusing him for Daredevil because they both wear red suits, but that's about it, like Easter egg level. They've been really tight-lipped about what's going on with the Defenders as of Avengers Infinity War, so I don't think they want to shoehorn in any Defenders if we're not actually going to see them moving around, and they'll be relatively localized to Manhattan. Like you have Iron Fist happening in Manhattan proper, you have Hell's Kitchen, you have Harlem. There's very little going on in Queens, and that's primarily where most of Spider-Man is going to take place. So best case scenario, somebody confuses him for Daredevil, the guy in the red suit. Like you hear people talk about a man in a red suit saving people, and then Spider-Man's like, no, that's not me, that's another guy. So I know I already talked about Kingpin though, that would actually be a really badass crossover just because he's such a big Spider-Man character in the comics. But thank you so much everyone for dropping questions, these are always a ton of fun to do. I'm not expecting another trailer at least until the Super Bowl, but they'll probably drop some teasers before then. There will be Spider-Man giveaways happening every week. Like, I'll just keep doing it. Don't worry. There'll be plenty of bonus videos. So I will say congratulations to the first winner. Emil Geiken, you win a Comixology gift card. Please private message me on the back end of my channel so I can get your contact details. So what's going to happen tomorrow is the Walking Dead finale is happening, so I'll do a video for that. There'll be some Game of Thrones, and then there'll be more comic book stuff happening on Monday. While you guys wait for that to post, you can click here to rewatch those Spider-Man trailers again, and you can click here for the trailer for the next episode of The Flash. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.